Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host today, Objectively Dan, and this is the live call-in show that happens every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time, where we talk to people about what they believe and why. If you'd like to call into the show, you can totally do that. The number is down below. It's 512-991-9242, or if you want to call in through your computer, you can do that too. It's tiny.cc/call TW. Real quick, Truth Wanted is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that's dedicated to the promotion of positive atheist culture and the separation of religion and government. And of course, every single week, I always have a special guest. This week is no different. Joining me is the one and only Trevor Poelman. Trevor, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's amazing to be here. I'm really excited. Bam,
Yes,
bam.
I'm excited to have you on here too, Trevor. You are the creator of the YouTube show Believe It or Not, Believe It or Not. You are also one half of the podcast Believe It or Not as well,
Hmm.
which is a great show that focuses on religious topics in general, but a lot of essays about the process of deconstructing, what religions do with their members, and just all that kind of good fun and not fun stuff that happens when religion happens. So I can honestly say I'm personally a fan of your work, so I'm really glad that I get to talk to you today. Oh, and we have a cat as well.
Yeah, and Jagger has, we have been Jagger bombed. He has joined the chat. Yeah, so yeah, I've been,
Yes,
I do the video essays, the podcast, and sorry, my cat distracted the crap out of me there, but yeah, it's very exciting to be here. It's
it
my
happens.
return. Yeah. Last time I was here was
Right.
Halloween, so this one's gonna be less spooky, I guess. Well,
Y-
although you do have your zombies, so
That's right. I do have a zombie background going on today, but the thing is with this show, Trevor, is you never know. You never know who you
hmm
get to talk to and what happens. So,
yeah,
Trevor,
exactly.
you of course have been writing these essays and making these video forms because you yourself were very religious at one time,
I
correct?
was. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I went to Bible college. I went to Christian school when I was a kid. I was a youth pastor for a bit. Yeah, I did all that stuff, and then one time I wasn't anymore. So,
Yeah. So I think, Trevor, like knowing what I know about your story, you're one of those Christians I like to call the ones that are deep in the paint. Okay, which
yeah.
is you don't just say you believe in God, right? You're an active participant of your church. In your case, you were a staff member. You went to a Bible
hmm
college. I mean, you did the whole
hmm
9 yards. Like you were living the life that a lot of Christians think is what's optimal, really, right, as a person can be. So when someone who lives as what I like to say, like deep in the paint as you did, it's oftentimes, I think, even more interesting when we hear about stories of your deconversion, right? Because it's not just like, oh yeah, I kind of went to church with my grandma, every year for Easter. It's no, this was my daily life. This was my community. This is how I interacted with people. So, like, you tell me about that process and that journey for you.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It was a long journey, that's for sure. It was kind of a slow journey at first. Like I went from, believing in the whole like miracles happen every day, and God shows His wonders through His teachers or whatever. To like, so basically, I gave give money to faith healers. And then like and then I went to more progressive churches because I was like, oh, actually, I don't think it's wrong to be gay. So eventually I went into that, and then it was like I would go to like the hipster churches that are like, there's maybe a God, but worship how you want. And so it was like a slow process. And then eventually I'm like,
right.
yeah, no, I just don't think I buy any of it anymore. So I've done the spectrum of all the evangelical type churches, trying to find the true one, and maybe I was
Yeah.
looking in the wrong place, but I never found him. So yeah.
You are like me, I think, where it's like if you're deep enough in, you can't just like completely unplug yourself. You
No.
kind of have to like kind of slide your way out,
Yeah.
right? Like you kind of have to develop a more and more progressive theology
Yeah.
before you can
Exactly.
really just say, actually, this whole thing is kind of suspect,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's really interesting. So, how long, at what age did you decide that everything was just kind of suspected, that nothing really made sense to you anymore?
Yeah, like I finally used the word atheist when I was 32. And then before that
Okay.
I consider myself agnostic for like a month. It's like I don't know what I
Mhm.
believe, and then it's like, yeah, I don't know. I just don't believe that stuff. Um so yeah, and then I think I really started questioning things like at the end of my youth pastor time. So like when I was 20, 27, around there. So, and that was, yeah, where I was like, I was already in like a more progressive church, and I was already, I didn't believe in hell and things like that. But then I still believed, I was still on board with a lot of stuff. And then I started questioning more, and definitely knew I had to get out of a leadership position in in churches with all the questions I had. So
Sure.
yeah, but it was still a while later that I actually said I don't believe anymore. So yeah, it was.
Yeah, so I've talked to people who worked in leadership positions, right? Generally
Yeah.
pastors, right? Or people who are like leaders in small groups and stuff like that. I don't often get to talk to folks who are youth group
Mm,
leaders, which is, I think, a different kind of dynamic in leadership, right? Because you're often telling people, or telling kids in the group, like, stuff that they never knew about the Bible for the very
yeah.
first time, right? If you're going to church and you're an adult, you're probably hearing stories you've heard before,
Yeah.
but you're almost like introducing a lot of these concepts and stuff to them, right? So, like, tell me about that dynamic.
Yeah, it's weird because yeah, a youth group is a place too where people just bring their friends who have never been to church, and
Right,
and then
right.
so you have the church kids who, yeah, they maybe had Sunday school, but yeah, don't really understand anything about like theology and what that actually means. So it's a mix of people. And then with youth group too, you always get that one or two kids who are on fire for the Lord, and that's all they want to talk about. So it's a big mix
Yeah,
of these different types
right.
of people. And so you have to balance that and find ways to kind of get on their level, but also you're under scrutiny from your bosses to make sure they're hearing about the Lord. So you got to find ways to actually, get
What
the gospel
did you have,
message out
like,
there.
quotas? Did you have a thing where it was
it,
like, I gotta baptize 5 kids this month? Like, that's what they were looking at, or what was that like?
it wasn't quotas like that, but I would have one-on-one meetings with either the pastor or other staff members, and I have to go over what I talked to the kids about, and of course I couldn't lie about it. So, and then at one church when I was doing my internship, they would have random parents just drop in to like audit to make sure you were actually teaching the kids about the Lord and not just playing
Oh,
dodgeball or whatever.
man. You had,
Yeah,
like, theology audits?
basically,
Really?
yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I had it
That's
once
interesting.
where
That's
yeah, I was teaching from
mm,
a curriculum that would use like movie clips and stuff. So you'd show a movie clip and then you'd talk about something from the Bible. And so it got back to some of the parents that I was just making them watch movie clips, and I never actually talked about the Bible because that's all the kids remembered was that, oh, we watched a scene from Forrest Gump or whatever. And so I had to like have a big meeting with parents about that. Like, no, I'm teaching the Bible.
oh my gosh, but so many churches do that, right? So many churches are like, yeah, here's a 5-minute scene from this movie, and it's like, let me plan a 45-minute sermon around this,
Yeah.
right? Like, I feel like that's really common. I don't,
It's really common.
but
Yeah.
you did bring this up. You brought this up too, like youth group, especially for me. I remember I was a very big youth grouper. Okay,
Yeah.
Wednesday nights were youth group like nights for like the entirety of my teenage years until I
Yeah.
went to college. Like that was a big deal. Like there's a social dynamic to it, right? It's where you see your friends, and it's where
Mhm.
you invite people who may not be regular members and stuff to kind of do fun stuff. Like half of my youth group, my youth pastor, we watched The Walking Dead on Sunday nights. Like we would go over to his
Really?
place and then watch that show, which in retrospect is a weird thing for a youth pastor to let us watch.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what I did for a bit there. And then like, it's just stuff like that where it was just kind of a hang up. But then at I think the part that you mentioned too, when you have people that are on fire for the Lord, right? I don't know if anybody would say I was on fire, maybe, but I was definitely super into it. It's like that became my social bubble. It was hard to break out of
Yeah.
that. And of course, it
Yeah.
transferred
Same.
when I got to college, where it's like, okay, the first thing I'm going to do is look for a thing like a youth group. So I joined Crew. That was my
Right.
college ministry, and then it kind of went from there. So there's the pipeline right there. The college
Yeah.
ministry pipeline starts with youth group, right?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's 100% true. My college roommate went to the real university while I was in Bible college, and he was really into Crew and stuff. And yeah, it always just seemed like, oh yeah, that's a youth group, but with weirder
Yeah.
rules.
So now that you're out of this and you're making YouTube videos, I mean, like I think there is a line that has to be crossed, right? Because like there's a lot of people that deconstruct, right, and then just kind of live their lives. They just kind of move
Yeah,
on. Maybe they post like on Facebook posts or something, or make some angsty tweets or whatever. But I think there's a difference between doing that and doing what we do, I would say, which is like going on the internet at least once a week, for you at least twice a week, and just putting stuff out there and talking about this stuff. So like what inspired you to go that far with this activism, I guess is a good way to call it.
well, okay. So the thing is, like, I had a podcast before that was just a comedy podcast. So it was like me and my buddy just making jokes and the classic two white dudes giving
Mhm.
their thoughts on things. And then it wasn't doing well and it was
Yeah,
coming to an
which is
end.
what we're
And I
doing
was like,
right now.
yeah, it's true. But it was like, okay, I wanna do something with a topic. So I was hanging out with my friend once, and she was her parents. You know the Bill Gaithers, those singers, and they have like all the other like gospel singers or whatever. It's like really big with old
Yes.
people, like old evangelical. So her parents were involved in that. They were some of
Mhm.
the singers, and we were talking about some of the just the crazy sides of the evangelical world. And I was like, "Oh, that's a topic we can do." And I thought I could be neutral with the podcast. Like I thought we would just talk about the topics and I wouldn't get angry. And I realized very quickly that that wasn't gonna happen. And then the video essays were like came a couple years later, and it was just like kind of a reaction to annoying things because I still have a lot of Christian friends and evangelical friends on Facebook and stuff, and just like I would notice how subtly oppressive some of the posts are, where it feels like it's supposed to be uplifting, but
Sure.
it's not. And those things would make me really angry. And then, so that's why I decided to do the first one, which I wasn't sure if I was going to do anymore after that, where I talked about how the Bible and Christianity are all about how you suck and you're not a good person. And the only way to be a good person is through God. And that kind of stuff made me mad. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll do a video about that. It was lockdown. I was laid off from work, so what else was I gonna do? And that's kind of where that came from. So it was never like a here's what I'm gonna do with my life. It was like, oh, people are responding to this. I guess I'll talk about something else that bothers me. So, and then it just kind of went from there.
Yeah, and you've produced a like your ethic on this, I gotta say, is something else, because you have over 100 episodes of the podcast, and you've only been doing it for like not even 2 years, right? Or but like barely 2 years.
No, the podcast we've been doing longer. So the podcast we do every 2 weeks. We've been doing it for
Okay,
about
okay,
4 years. Yeah, and it's the video
okay. There
essays
you
we've
go.
been doing for about a year and a half. Yeah, or I've been doing it.
Okay. Still though, if you go to your channel right now, you have at least 100 hours worth of content, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like it's got to be
Yeah,
up there.
at least, yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot. You have a lot of thoughts on this, Trevor. I'm just saying it's
Yes,
interesting
I
that you're
do.
just like, you know what? Maybe we could talk about this once, and now you're like, actually, this is my whole thing now. You know?
And another thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how
Yeah.
that
So
happened
so
because it
you
was like sorry.
go
Oh, no.
ahead.
Yeah, no, I was saying it's crazy how that happened because like after the first one started doing well, I think it was my third one, and it started doing like better. And I was so nervous. I'm like, I think this is all I have. I don't know if I have anything else to say. What am I gonna do? And then someone would mention something like, oh yeah, that is something I'm passionate about or whatever. And then it's like, oh yeah, and then this, and then this. So yeah, it adds up.
Right. Right. I think one thing that I like about your content is one, you take a very clear editorial position on like
Yeah.
religious organizations. I think like
Yeah.
you've got your stance, but you don't just talk about. I mean, you do talk about the theology, a lot of it, right? Which is,
Mhm.
as you mentioned, a lot of it boils down to, especially in evangelical circles, like you suck, you are
Yeah.
irredeemable, but God redeems you anyway.
Yeah.
Therefore, be a part of this hierarchy of that we've developed to, kind of put you in your place, essentially, right? Like now you're part of the system. So, but on top of that, you also talk about like the sociological and psychological implications of church, right? So like I
Mhm.
see there's two sides of this in like sort of the atheist sphere, but we talk about this stuff. There's the philosophical implications of this stuff being true, right? And you have a lot of
Yeah.
people who go into the debates on, oh man, this theology is right or what this interpretation says. And then there's the actual like lived experiences of being a church goer, right? And like
Mhm.
being a part of Christian community and what that actually does to you. And I would argue is maybe more important to talk about when we
Mhm.
talk about these things. I obviously I'm friends with a lot of people who like to do these kinds of
Yeah.
debates and talk about the merits of the truthiness of these positions, but I'm very much interested in like what does this do to you as a person? What does that look like in the real world, right?
Mhm.
And for me, it was either neutral or sometimes positive, but like a lot of negative too, right? Like you see yourself as part of these systems, as you mentioned, that can be kind of oppressive, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think because I always say, like, when people are like, "Oh, you haven't disproved God," like, that's a comment I get on almost any video. Still haven't disproved God. I'm like, that's not really the point of what I do. And I always say, well, I'm a big dummy.
Right, right.
That's not what I'm doing here. What I am doing is I saw this family member get abused by a church member, and then or a church leader, and then the pastor said, "Well, in the Bible it says we have to forgive, so we have to forgive him," instead of actually doing anything to help this relative. Like that's the place I'm coming from, where I've
Mm,
seen this happen, or you hear about this happen, and
mm,
these things are dangerous, and these things need to be addressed, and a lot of times they're not. And to me, like, I've done some things where I'm like, this to me seems like maybe there is no God, but most of it is like, if you really believe your God is real, then why are you allowing these people to do these things in his name, kind of thing. But so
right, right. And it's and for me it was like um you kind of justify the status quo, right? The way things are the way things are because they are, and maybe that's how God allowed it to be, or maybe it's because these elders in this church community know what they're doing and
yeah.
know what they're talking about and I don't. But the more that I learned about the Bible and its history and also just the history of the church in general, and again
Hmm.
like the history of the structures of these organizations and their effect on the world, like I feel more empowered to be like, actually, I can say pretty confidently that these people don't know what they're talking
Yeah.
about. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there is a power dynamic there that can be right. It's like there's a power
Exactly.
dynamic that's intimidating when you're a younger believer, I'd say.
Yeah.
Right? Like and that it makes it harder
Yeah.
because the Bible's a big book. And if you haven't read it all, you don't know what's in there. You don't know if there's maybe answers to the questions that you have, right?
Right. And then when you find that answer, like there's like websites where you can go and Google what's the answer to this problem in the Bible, and they're tailored to like give you these wise sounding advice. And then and then if you do your own stuff, it's like also bash babies against the rocks. And you're like, oh, that doesn't align with this
Right.
idea. And yeah, that's tough too. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
And, I was thinking too when you're
Yeah. It is comical in retrospect, but like,
oh no, sorry,
go
it's just the
ahead.
delay. You go ahead.
Mm. Yeah, we are having a little bit of delay here, folks, but that's okay. We'll still be able to take your calls here in a second, which is what we're gonna do. But before we do that, I was just gonna say, yeah, like it's funny in retrospect when you know the whole picture, but that searching process, that deconstructing process is really hard when you're trying to look for those
Mhm.
answers and see what's up. I can see where people can. I know exactly what you're talking about because they have it so that they're the first results on Google. When you
Yeah.
look for like answers to this Bible question,
Yeah.
and you'll see these explanations, and it's like, well, if we look at this biblical scholar, if we look at this theologian, this could be their response to it. But you go to the next page, and it's like, oh, this one's actually written by Calvinists, and they actually think that this means this.
Yeah.
It's like you still don't really get answers, even as a Christian. Like you still have to land on a denomination
Yeah.
to really understand what you're looking at. But we're about at that point here where I think we should get to some
Sure.
callers, which I'm excited to talk to, and I want people to talk to you just so people know. Again, we aren't talking a lot about Christianity, and what that religion encompasses, but this is Truth Wanted. We talk about Bigfoot, aliens, conspiracy theories, whatever else you want to talk to us about. You can do that, and you can do it by calling into that number below, or by going to tiny.cc/call-TW. We'd love to talk to you about what you want to talk about. But before we get to calls, Trevor,
Mhm.
I have to thank the patron of the week. Every single week, we always have a special patron that we give a shout out to. We, of course, want to give thanks to everybody that donates on that Patreon, but we always want to give a shout out to one particular patron every week. And this week's patron of the week is going to be Lauren Zhuge. Thank you so much, Lauren, for donating on patreon.com. And if you would like to donate on Patreon, you can do that by going to tiny.cc/PatreonTW, and you can become a patron of the week. So with that out of the way, I think we should go ahead and get to some calls. You ready for that?
Born ready. I was born a week late.
Born ready. Okay. All right. That's funny. That's really funny. But we are going to go ahead and talk to some folks. Let's do it. We are talking to Red Dead Red. Pronouns are they, them. Amazing name. I love it. I love Red Dead Redemption. Probably one of my favorite game series ever. Red Dead Bread. You are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
can hear you just
Hello?
fine.
Oh, all right. Hi. First time, long time, I guess. And right now I'm just reaching out. I live in California, more specifically the coastal San Francisco Bay Area region. And for me, in my day-to-day life, religion doesn't necessarily come up that much, but just listening to some of your calls, as well as just looking at some other atheist resources and all that sort of thing online, it seems to come up in, say, your lives or some of the other callers' lives a lot more compared if they live somewhere a bit more Midwest or Southern. And yeah, I
Sure.
was wondering, sorry?
No, I'm just saying, sure, I totally agree with you, right? It's like you have to grow up in a certain part of the world for it to be more relevant to you. If you grow up in places like, I imagine, LA, San Diego, that like I've been to those places. They don't care. They really don't care as much as they do in like places where I grew up, right? So
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to finally get to my question, I'm wondering if just sort of the environment in which you're raised, in those sort of posts, you can generally sort of feel a lot more anger coming from the atheist in that situation, either if they're deconverting or in that area sort of deconverting. Not to say anything about like the stuff you were talking about or previously about crimes being covered up or anything, just general anger at religion or just the world they grew up in as a sort of thing. And I was wondering, I guess, how much do you think just the environment of where you grow up and where you basically live in, how much does the religiosity sort of affect the nature of your atheistic beliefs or vent sessions, as it might sometimes be? Or
well, that's interesting. Like, yeah, I think I understand your question, right? Like, what my environmental outset, right? Like, how does that affect me today? How does that inform my worldview, right? And so obviously I've talked about this before. I grew up in Waco, Texas, right? Which is like, it's dead center of heart of Texas. Okay, you average conservative like stereotype that you can think of in your head, like that's most of Waco, right? So that's just how it is. That's just how I grew up around. And so like, even if I wasn't in church, I would still get those religious values, and which are ultimately political values, right? Just in my day to day. So there's definitely an influence there. And we often comment on this, but religion isn't separate from politics. In fact, I would say like they're so intermingled, you almost can't tear them apart, right? Because they're both ideologies that inform your worldview, inform how you should act and react to the world around you. So I grew up around conservatives that got angry at every single thing that Democrats did. I grew up around conservatives that were mad at Obama for just like breathing. I like people who literally thought Obama was like a Muslim in disguise, right? And actually helping Al Qaeda and stuff like that. That wasn't uncommon, I guess. So obviously, like a little bit of that would rub off on me, and eventually, like my views about gay people, my views about trans people, were also affected by that outcome. So I think like part of the reason why you see the atheist community so much angrier in that respect is because like that ideology influenced us so much that it allowed us to become bigots. It allowed us to treat people differently, and it affected us in ways that we're still trying to figure out every day, honestly, just by a daily deconstruction and realizing how those systems affect us. So I don't know, maybe you can speak to some of that too, Trevor.
Yeah, well, I was thinking like too about how, so I grew up in a very religious family, like not just my immediate family, uncle's a pastor, cousins are really into religion. It's like everybody around me, and I lived in a small town that was very religious. But then you look at my co-host in my podcast, and he didn't grow up religious. He didn't grow up with that at all. He grew up in a very liberal town. And so the way we react to things is very different. Like, I think I get a little bit more angry than he does because I've seen just how it can hurt people. And I think it's a lot from perspective. I've also, I have anxiety, so I get angry at, my Uber driver or something some days. So it just depends. But yeah, I think, there's definitely outside influences on that for sure.
It's kind of like asking, like, man, why, as a queer person, do you get mad when people talk about gay people negatively, or why do you get mad at bad representation and stuff? It's like, because as a queer person, like that affects your life. That is you. And for me, as a former Christian, right, it's like, why do I get mad at the Christians? Because I live that life, and I know that you can think differently on these topics. You know what I mean? Like, you can definitely, you don't have to have the Bible as a worldview central to you. But if that's completely foreign to you, I get why that looks off-putting. And it's like, man, why do you care so much about this thing? Because that's my friends and family,
Yeah, totally fair. And then I also I wanted to sort of get both your opinions on this idea I've seen floated around where sometimes Christian deconverting former Christian atheists sort of bring on sort of preachiness orthodoxy of Christianity, where they can be right, everyone else is wrong, and they sort of that also forms a bit of their lashing out. I think I've seen that a little bit sometimes, I want to say, but I want to get your opinion on it too.
I mean, that's true. That's true for pundits of any ideology, right? Like, you look at all the leftists you see on Twitch that stream or stuff, or the conservatives that have their own podcasts and stuff, right? Like, you can always find one group in a worldview that's gonna be like that kind of thing. I think the atheist community gets that rap. I mean, rightfully so. I'm not gonna say that it's not true, only because like we have nothing but criticisms to really say, right? Like the second that we praise these systems, right, that we give credit to these institutions, then people use that against us and say, well, this undermines your entire point. You know, these things are fine and we should just keep them as the way they are. But like I am interested in dismantling these systems personally. I don't think that they should exist. And so yeah, that puts me in the position of being a contrarian, which naturally leads to like kind of that angry rhetoric that you see. But you know, people approach it differently. I try to be chill about it as most I can.
Same.
But it's hard not to get mad, right,
Oh,
Trevor?
exactly. It is. And I was thinking too, like you're talking about, I remember back in the day when I was a church guy, and if somebody like came off the streets and cleaned up and came to Jesus and stopped their wicked lives or whatever, they were the most passionate for God and for getting the word out there about God. It was always like the new person coming in who was like, have you heard about this? And I think there's a bit of that too, where it's like you're believing one thing your whole life, and all of a sudden your whole like life turns upside down, and you're like, did you know this? Or did you know about this? And other people like, yeah, we don't care. You don't have to preach that test. And I'm like, but I want everyone to know. And so I think there's an element of that in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me on, and good night to you both.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the call. It is important. Yeah, it's important to point this out because like I definitely thought that way. I still think this way about the atheist community, that it's a bunch of like whiny white dudes that you know, go off about every which thing, right? It's like, yeah, that perception is definitely changing, of course. You know, obviously there's a lot more people in the movement that can kind of fill it out with their voices and perspective. And it doesn't always have to be anger. But like anger does kind of drive it. You know, it really does at the end of the day. I don't do this stuff because I'm completely chill with the world that I grew up in and you know, the stuff that happened to me and other people, right? It's like I want that to change, and that can inspire passion and emotion, which oftentimes comes to anger, right?
Yeah. And I mean, just look at like what's happening, like you said, with politics and stuff like that. Like you guys have like actual people from like in your Congress saying that Christian nationalism is cool and we should totally do that. And it's like, that stuff's scary and we should be angry about that.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely, right? Like that's another thing too. If you consider yourself someone who's politically interested, right? Who wants to understand, especially American politics and how it works, you have to have a pretty intimate understanding of religion, specifically the kind of Christian nationalism and evangelicalism that happens, you know, in this country, because it's so influential to how people vote and how policy is decided. And it's crazy, but it is how it is. So anyway, before we get to our next call, I'd like to tell you all about how you can help support the show in other ways. You can do that also by becoming a member. If you become a member on YouTube, you can click that little bit join button there. And for as little as 99 cents a month, you can get emojis in the chat. And your name gets highlighted in the chat as well. And you're also going to be immune to chat timeouts. So check that out if you want to be a member. It's just another way to help support the show. And one other way you can support the show, and you can be lazy about it too, is if you shop on Amazon. You can support the ACA at no cost to you. All you have to do is go to tiny.cc/AmazonSmileACA, and you can designate the Atheist Community of Austin as your selected charity. and Amazon will donate a portion of their profit directly to the ACA. So if you're already shopping on Amazon and you want to support us, that's just a great way to do it, and it's at no extra cost to you. So make big corporations pay for us instead of you, and I totally support that. So anyway, just some ways you can help support the ACA and what we're trying to do here. But with that out of the way, Trevor, I want to go ahead and talk to our next caller here. This is one we were looking at before the show. This is Muhammad, who's calling in from California. Muhammad, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Yes, sir. It's nice to talk to you again, Dan. And, first time meeting Trevor, but it's nice to be on here talking again.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, great to talk with you too, Muhammad. You had an interesting little blurb this time that I want to read out here. You want to talk about the problem with Western morality and how tolerance is eroding belief. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not like me kind of I don't want to like kind of bring out like kind of like I have hatred or something, it's just I see it as kind of like this is like the main thing I want to say is that I realize that we all live in the Western world, European nations, America, Canada, all that, and here kind of it's like tolerance, right? It's like a thing that's kind of it's just a part of like the society, it's like it's one of like the main things, and I feel like
hopefully
kind
it
of
becomes more a main thing, but
right, yeah, I mean it is a pillar of liberal democracies, right? Tolerance for other people's ideas.
Pillar, yeah.
I think people need to be a little more tolerant.
That's the perfect word, pillar, right? So in America it's so like I don't see anything wrong with ethnic diversity, it's like here there's just you got Arabs, Asians, blacks, like you just got Indians, you got everybody. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But a lot of that is in the West because of, kind of, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but because of like tolerance and all that. But I feel like when it comes to beliefs though, this is like kind of the problem that I want to point out is that whatever belief systems you have, if you're in a land where it's just, tolerance, it's you have to be tolerant, I feel like slowly your belief systems are actually eroding because, you're okay with everything. And, how do I say it? Yeah, like, I think about it like a liberal, right? From a liberal perspective, if he just, if he sees like a Satanist and like a Christian, for example, and he's just okay with both of them, I say like, what belief systems does kind of the liberal actually have? Like he's okay with both. Like I just feel like when you tolerance, I get it that if it's kind of, I don't know what the Western world their intentions were, when they had democracy and tolerance and all that, but I feel like
I got you.
Tolerance, if it's like because we don't want.
There's a paradox, right, Muhammad? There's a paradox with tolerance because if you tolerate too much, suddenly that can be used against you in certain ways, right? And we often have debates on what does it mean to tolerate, right? I wouldn't call myself a liberal per se. I don't know if that's the right term for it. I mean, I believe in like liberal principles. I would use other political labels for myself, but like I do see this as something that happens without going too deep into it because this is not an a strictly political show. But there is a liberal principle that does say like, yeah, we should maximize our tolerance as much as possible, whatever form that may be, and that can often lead to really great things like the acceptance of people, as you've mentioned before, of different racial diversities and different cultural backgrounds. It also means accepting people of different sexual orientations and gender expressions. to live their lives freely. But it can also mean letting a Nazi go out on the streets and hold up signs and like make people really uncomfortable, or like I don't know, the Ku Klux Klan just like having a rally like that can be signs of dangerous things. Like we see what happened in like Charlottesville, for example, when people on both sides were protesting, and what happens with that? Well, some people protesting, other people counter protesting. So what is the answer to the tolerance paradox? I don't know. There's people that have proposed different ideas. I have personal boundaries myself, but I don't know if I could write it out in a philosophical treatise on like what's acceptable and what's not, because like this goes into like free speech. This goes into a lot of different ideas, right? One thing I will say, and then I'll pass it off to Trevor, is that I do believe that at least for the United States, the intention was to create a secular democracy. And by secular democracy, that is not having religious principles ostensibly guiding government. Obviously, in practice, that hasn't always worked out. But they didn't want individual denominations to influence the control and aspects of government. I think that much is pretty clear. So anyway, passing it on to Trevor, I want to know what your thoughts on this, because it is an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, I think you talked more about the political side of it, and I was thinking more like the personal side of it with tolerance, like because I have friends who are Christians, I have friends who are Muslim, I have friends who are atheists, I have friends who are spiritual but don't really have a definition for it, and of course I love them and I'm tolerant of them and will do, and it's that goes back to that old thing of like, yeah, it's not what you believe, it's what you do. So if your belief causes you to do something awful, then that's what I'm being like, no thank you, back away. And but if your beliefs is just like, here, I'm trying to, this makes me a better person, or I think this makes me a better person, or whatever it is, and you're not hurting other people, then that's kind of where the line goes. So yeah, I can be friends with a Christian and a Satanist at the same time, as long as that Christian isn't yelling slurs at my sibling because of their gender identity, or or that Satanist isn't, well, I guess doing the same thing. Like it really depends on the person and even like what they represent and what they're all about. So it's not just a blanket, oh, I tolerate everyone's beliefs. I think for me it's just I tolerate your beliefs based on the actions that come out of it, and just come out of who you are. So I think that's a big thing to think about too when it comes to that. So
yeah, but at the same time, we can't like say, well, this is exactly how we want our society to be, and we're not going to let anybody else's ideas ever permeate that culture, because I think that's bad for everybody too, right? Like that's a very totalitarian idea of how a society should work. So it's a tightrope to balance, right? On how you figure out what's going to be possible, what you're going to allow, what you think is going to be acceptable, versus how you actually legislate that in practice, and what groups. Because like here's the thing too, right? Somebody could say, hey, the ACA or shows like this one are against Christians and talk against Christian rhetoric, and maybe that counts as hate for some people because they don't like what we have to say. But that's why we have to be very clear and nuanced on our criticisms and how we talk about these ideologies and these institutions. Otherwise, you could easily flip the switch on that and say like, oh, we suddenly can't be critical of the things that we want to be critical about.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's like, I mean, in what I do, I watch so many sermons, and I would argue that there are people out there who are very intolerant of people who don't have a belief or don't know what they believe. But yeah.
Oh yeah.
But on the other hand, I don't want to just be like, they do it, so I want to do it. I want to be like, I love my family so deeply, but they have different beliefs than I do, and that's okay. And I respect their opinions on some things, and other things I'm like, no. So
yeah. So that's us. That's our take on this, Muhammad. What do you think?
Yeah, like I agree with you guys. I know like you guys are educated people. So that's why I like calling into these shows, having conversations with you guys, you know, because I feel like I benefit myself intellectually and all that. I just want to say that, you know, I feel like I thought about it like, just like, you know, like, let's say just whatever religious doctrine someone has, if he starts to tolerate, let's say, like, you know, homosexuality or Satanism or just whatever XYZ, his religion will disappear over time, and like it won't be there anymore, you know. And like, kind of, yeah, you said the paradox of tolerance, and like, yeah, it's just when I thought about that, I was like, whoa, like that's the issue, you know. And
Yeah, the religion may not be there as it currently exists, right? But you know, Trevor and I were just talking about earlier in the show. We both adapted more progressive theologies before we let the whole thing go, right? So, like, if we're just talking exclusively within the realm of Christianity, there is a little bit of room to breathe when it comes to tolerating some other ideas. Now, I think it is a pretty common occurrence, again, that people become more progressive in the ideas and then eventually just leave the whole thing. But some of them are pretty content just staying at that progressive theological point and having their religion exist as it is. I mean, like, all forms of Christianity that we see today, even what we think are the most traditional ones, are really nothing like they were 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Like they've all had to change and adapt to culture at some point, whether they like to admit it or not. So I think that's just a natural function of religion.
Yeah.
You know, it has to change.
Yeah, because if you look at, like, even the Southern Baptist Convention, they started because they wanted to own people as property. But you're not going to find too many people in that organization that will still stand by those principles. But yeah, so
yeah, I bet you'll find at least one.
Yeah,
though.
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't deny that. Yeah, there's a few. But, yeah. So yeah, I think people need to become more tolerant. If that affects some beliefs, that's cool. And other people are just going to be underground and maybe considered a hate group. And I don't know what I think about that, but I'd rather people.
You know, Muhammad. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I think Muhammad has a great point, though. I think this is why you see a lot of the conservative evangelical types really rail against being tolerant, right? Because they know they know that this is a slippery slope. I mean, they'll talk about that very openly. They say, if we start to accept this, then we need to accept these other things.
Yeah,
and that does kind of ruin the foundations a little bit, right?
Yeah, that's true. It really did for me. And so, yeah, I could see why. Yeah, that's one of those things.
Yeah,
where
exactly.
You look at it, like, yeah, I get it.
They're telling the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, not wrong.
Yeah.
You know, sorry.
But anyway, Muhammad.
You know what? Oh, yes, sir. Sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just going to say that, you know, I'm sure, like, you know, we all know, like, you know, Andrew Tate, he's been, like, blowing up on like, platforms, TikTok, Instagram, all that. He said something. He was like, you know, he said on a podcast, he said, if you tolerate everything, you stand for nothing. And like, kind of, when he said that statement, I was like, you know, I reflected on it. I was like, man, like, that's true. You know, like, you having kind of moral principles, you know, whatever principles you have, that's what distinguishes good from evil, you know, and kind of, like, there's necessarily going to be conflict, you know, because if you see something that you consider, that you see as evil, you're going to forbid it. You know, you can't tolerate that. You can't be okay with that. And you know, I just feel like tolerance and all that, in this context of the conversation we're having, you know, it's not a solution. It's not going to, you know, if people kind of want tolerance because they don't want conflict, that's not a solution. It's just, you know, you're just, you know, you what you stand for is going to disappear. You're not going to stand for anything anymore. And you know, that's a big
Andrew
problem.
Tate also said Andrew Tate also said that he only dates 18 and 19-year-olds because they've been through less dick. So I don't really care what Andrew Tate says about anything. He's an evil bastard. So I will say that. Don't listen to Andrew Tate. So I'll just go there. He's pretty much a pedophile. But go on.
Oh, scandalous allegations from Trevor Poelman.
Sorry,
once again, our guests do
he's a
not
gross
represent the
person.
official views of the atheist community of Austin.
Exactly.
But
Sorry.
I'm not saying I personally disagree with you. I'm just saying, but anyway, you're pointing to something here, Muhammad, that's really interesting, which is a criticism that's given to secular communities like ours, right? Which is this idea of, where do we draw the line if morality is even outside of the scope of human understanding, if it truly isn't objective, if it isn't exactly what's been described before by religious communities, then what is it? How do we figure it out? I mean, this is like a central thesis of postmodern thinkers who are like, there may not be an answer, and so therefore anything goes. You don't have to go that far. I mean, I personally think there are some lines and people just have to kind of figure it out, but it may not be a situation where, like religion, we can all kind of centrally agree and organize around those same principles. It may take it in a different form. I mean, obviously there are organizations that are pretty liberal, that are pretty tolerant, that still organize around central principles that they believe are right and wrong, despite the objective or unobjective nature of that. People are still going to have an acceptance for what they think is right and wrong there, and that's never going to go away, just even if it's not justified in the same sense that a Christian might think it's justified, because it's not making an appeal to some sort of higher power or some sort of objective moral framework. That's kind of the beauty, but also the problem with living in a free liberal democracy is you don't get to make that call anymore. At least for a lot of us, we still try to figure it out, right? But it doesn't have the same potency as, well, because God said so. It's kind of like, oh, because this might have harmful consequences for human beings. Like that's an appeal you could make. Or there are other kinds of utilitarian appeals and considerations of interest, but it's just not the same, right?
Yeah. And sorry, the Andrew Tate thing made me angry, but I should have looked at the actual argument there instead. And I do apologize for that. But yeah, no, exactly. Like, maybe it's time to move on from some of the moral codes we've had and figure out a way to actually be moral without just saying we're moral.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. And that's okay. I'm personally all right with Andrew Tate slander, whether it's true or not. Like, that's anytime we can hate on Andrew Tate, that's actually totally fine with me. So anyway, Muhammad, I hope we answered your questions here. Did you have anything else you want to add?
No.
All right, sounds good. We'll go ahead and let you go then, Muhammad. Thanks so much for calling into the show and talking to us for a bit there. I do appreciate the way that you asked that question, because I really thought it was going to go a different way. But I think it's an important point. I think it's an ongoing discussion that we're going to have to figure out. I mean, a conversation that started in the 20th century is continuing to the 21st, which is, okay, so a lot more of us are thinking God isn't real. How do we organize ourselves morally, right? Like, how do we actually figure out what we can allow and not allow in our society? What do we base those judgments on if it's not for the principles of Christian tradition or any other religious tradition? We have to figure out secular systems that work for us. And there's been a lot of proposed ideas. I personally have my thoughts about what I think works and what doesn't, but I can't appeal to it to the same way that I could before, right? I can't just say, because God says so. So it's a different game we're talking about here, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times too, when you're in those belief systems, there are things that you're told are morally correct but seem off. So you have to find ways to get past those moral commands of, like, some of the things in the Bible that, like women must be quiet in church and things like that, where it's like, so churches find ways around that stuff too. So we just have to realize that we've been doing it for a long time, and we're just going to do it without that umbrella.
Yeah, we're just a bunch of apes trying to figure this out.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're I don't know if we're doing a good job or not. Who's to say? But we're trying,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But anyway, I want to let you guys know about another way to support the show. It's through our brand new merch store. So check that out if you haven't already. It's tiny.cc/merch ACA. You can get all of your favorite stuff like hoodies, t-shirts, and coffee mugs. And we're also doing a monthly shirt club. It may not always be a shirt, actually. We are doing a special monthly item. You can see that item going up there right now. I think you're only going to have one more week after this to check it out. So definitely take a look if you want to support the show that way. And if you like this show, but you don't like my face, well, I got good news for you because we have an audio version of this podcast that you can listen to. It's at tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. And that's not just for this show, that's for all of the shows that we produce here at the Atheist Community of Austin. So check out Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen, and all the other programs that we do. And you can listen to all of them just by going to that link. So check it out. And of course, we always have to feature our special promo that we always do every single week. And we're going to play our promo video for you now. So check it out.
Sex in the shower is just like, hey, what if we take one of the most pleasurable acts in the human experience, but one of us will be freezing cold and the other one will be uncomfortable? How about we do that? Any takers? Yeah.
Or there's a hope for me in the afterlife, a reward for being that. Like I don't need that to do what I do. If anything, I think those ideas limit human potential. I don't think we have to be the subjects of a divine creator to have meaningful relationships with people.
There is the Christianity aspect, there's the nationalism aspect, and there's the big ass guns aspect. Although that Christianity bit, they might want to close read it because I don't think Jesus mentions guns that often.
There are so many famous magicians out there that are also well-known like skeptics. And it's like, just because you're a magician doesn't mean that you're a skeptic, and vice versa. Like, I'm a skeptic, but I definitely cannot do magic.
You can't see me from the waist down, but from the waist down, I'm actually a lizard. And I can lay eggs, and I can run faster than a cheetah as a result of my very powerful lizard legs. Would you just accept that? Or would you be skeptical? What do I have? I need something physical to hold in my hand. So like this is species 1 of my lip gloss. And then species 1 of my lip gloss produces species 2 of my lip gloss. And species 2 can produce with species 1, but then species 3 comes up here. Species 3 can produce with species 2, but not species 1. These two can reproduce together, but this one can't go all the way back to the first one, which we've already said is basically genetically identical with a slight iteration. That is genetics.
One.
And we're back to the show. I am talking to Trevor Poelman from the Believe It or Not YouTube channel and podcast. Trevor, there was a question from the chat, looking at here, asking had either host had paranormal experiences? And you said earlier, just very casually off the cuff, like, yeah, I used to support like faith healing groups and stuff like that. So I would consider that paranormal, right? Like if somebody laid their hands on me and healed me, I would say that's a fucking ghost that did
I did
that,
the whole
right?
like slain in the spirit.
I don't know.
Where you fall over.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I did that whole slain in the spirit thing. So a preacher would
wow.
like, put their hand on me, and then whatever, I'd fall over. Another thing, though, this is one I always answered for this question is, so my family really believed in angels and wanted to see angels. It was like a goal of ours, right? And so some people in the family just said they did. Others of us wanted to actually see it. So at one point, my brother had seen this ball of light fly over his head. And then another sibling said that they saw a similar thing, this like orb, like this ball of light. And then a couple days later, I saw the same thing. It was like I was lying up in the back of the car, and then I just look out and this orb goes over. And I really thought that was an answer to prayer, that angels were coming and they were giving us signals. Years later, after I left the faith, I Googled what that could have been. And carbon monoxide poisoning is the answer. That's one of the things that can happen.
What? Carbon monoxide.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
So all these years, I thought I'd saw an angel, but it was carbon monoxide poisoning. So
I shouldn't laugh at that. That's terrible, but at the same time, that is kind of funny. Like,
yeah,
oh my gosh. Wow. I mean, like, the thing is too, right? Like, people talk about, oh, I saw a light, or I saw these balls of
Mhm.
light, or whatever. It's like that. If you ever read the Bible, that's not what angels
Yeah,
are,
exactly.
man.
Yeah.
Like, they're either some people like, or if you go Old Testament, like really freaky. Like, you'd know an angel if you
Yeah.
saw it. It's not going to be a ball of light or whatever. Like, that's
Exactly.
that maybe is a demon or something. I don't know, but not
Yeah, we're
an
just so
angel.
suggestible.
Anyway, so
sorry.
no, you're right. We are suggestible, and we do take these kind of, when ideas exist in our culture, right? And then we look at the outside world, we can like kind of append those ideas sometimes, or
Yeah.
overlay those ideas to things that may not actually be there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I am so glad I get to talk with you today. I want to keep talking to some other callers though, so let's do it. We're going to talk to Red, who's calling in from Ohio. Red, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Hello. This was actually something that was prompted from a few weeks back on Truth Wanted, but I wasn't able to get onto the show with my call. I wanted to talk about how I used to believe in the Lochness monster and how it was the Leviathan of the Bible and Job.
Oh yes, please
Yeah.
tell me. Please tell me how you came to that conclusion, because I want to hear that.
I had weird little theories as a kid. I was big into science, and of course, I grew up conservative Christian. I was taught that in the sixth day creationism story. So I believe everything in the Bible was literary, even Leviathan. So I put two and two together when I was younger that the Loch Ness monster might be Leviathan of the Bible, because they sounded similar to me when I read it. And not only did I believe that with other little weird theories, because I would look up all these little things on the internet about it. And I remember in the Bible saying how the Leviathan breathes fire. So then I would go through, make little theories on how it could breathe fire. And I actually remember drawing out like the Leviathan and Loch Ness monster and stuff. I believe that it had multiple chambers and acid with it that would react with each other to create the fire so it could breathe fire. And I remember showing this to actually I think it was somebody, a professor that worked at the Creation Museum, because my parents would take me and my brother to these homeschooling conventions, and there was one of them was having a presentation. I actually went up to him and showed him my theories, and he actually liked them. Of course, now I don't believe any of this, but it's something I look back on and laugh at from time to time.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I totally believe it. That reminds me of when I was a kid. I think I can't remember who was on TV, but like you're a kid and you're kind of flipping the channels and you're seeing what's on. And I remember there was this old, obviously fundamentalist pastor who was talking about the verse in Job. And if you're not familiar with Job, if you've ever heard the word Leviathan before, that actually comes from the Bible. It's from the book of Job, where there's just kind of this random description of this monster that's called Leviathan. It really doesn't have anything to do with the story, but they're trying to make like a metaphor, and they're saying, yes, like the Leviathan, it's very strong and very big. And it's like, if you don't know what that is, it is obviously like a made up monster. Like, I don't know if that works as a very good literary device, but literary criticism aside, I remember seeing this guy saying, like, yeah, if you look at this, look, it says it has the tail of a cedar tree. Now, this can't be a hippo. This can't be an elephant, because they don't have big tails. It has to be a dinosaur. And that's how we know that dinosaurs existed around the time of man, because what could this description be, right? And I remember asking my dad about this, like, hey, what do you think about this? And yeah, it doesn't Doesn't really work out. Doesn't really work out with their understanding of history, right?
Yeah, and I think that was Kent Hovind that would do things like that too, and he talked about the behemoth.
Oh my gosh!
And yeah.
I used to watch him all the time when I was younger. My mom would put Kent Hovind on for me and my brother when we were younger. It's so weird now looking back and watching his videos now as an atheist.
Yeah, I bet. This is a side question, Red. I got to know this. What is a homeschool convention like? What do you do there? Do you just talk about homeschool curriculum? Do you get to like hang out with other homeschool kids? Like what do you even do? Yeah. I don't even know what that would be.
That's literally it.
Okay. All right. Well, I guessed it.
They would have these panels and stuff. That's pretty much how it was. Looking back now, I think that's probably would be pretty boring. But they did give out a lot of free candy, so I liked that part a lot.
Was this a homeschool convention like purely for homeschool, or was it like a secret like front for just creationism, like schooling and stuff?
You know, that's probably what it was actually, because almost every booth was talking about like creationism in some way, but and then there's other booths that had a homeschooling Bible curriculum. It was, of course, it was all the booths were biblical based for homeschooling. Because of course, if it wasn't, my parents wouldn't take me. We actually went to several of these conventions. It was something that was a big part of my childhood that I remember going to. And they would have these panels that my parents would take us to, and we'd listen to the panel speakers talk about some bullcrap or another. I don't remember anymore. Probably for good reason.
Yeah, I was just thinking that reminds me of like it's like Comic-Con but for homeschool conventions. So instead of going around and meeting the artists, you're meeting the.
It's like that, but to say that it is a lot. It's a lot less cooler because I've been to Comic-Cons and I enjoyed them a lot more than I did the homeschooling convention.
Yeah, exactly.
I like someone who was there being like, yeah, it's actually not as cool though. Yeah. Like it's actually worse than you think. Oh man, that's funny. Like, you know, hey, I know at least one person who I respect very dearly who homeschools their kids. Okay. And if that's the choice you're gonna make and you think you can do it, I mean, shout outs to you. But I am not afraid to say I don't think most people who homeschool their kids should do it. I don't know. It seems like the curriculum kind of sus. If you're looking at like how dinosaurs lived amongst people and stuff, I think maybe a public school teacher is going to know more about, you know, what actually happened, right? But like that's what it seems to be. Like half of my friends that grew up homeschool, like it was a creationist kind of homeschooling curriculum, amongst other things. And they turned out all right, I guess, most of them. So
the funny thing about that is if my mother didn't find a creation-based science book, she would specifically scratch out all the evolution parts it talked about, and she's like, you don't need to learn that. That's all bullcrap anyways. Just read what's not marked, scratched out. So yeah, that was my science education.
Well, that's good. Well, how's your science education now, Red? You believe the Earth is several billion years old? Okay, that's good. That's good. So you've at least changed that front. Well, thanks so much for telling that story. That's really, really funny, and I really like the putting together of the Loch Ness Monster and the Leviathan. It's actually funny. The Loch Ness Monster, one of the first reported sightings of it was, I believe, a saint from the Catholic Church that pointed out. Yeah, exactly. That pointed out that the monster was there in the first place. So if you want to point to some of the origins of the Loch Ness Monster, actually the Catholic Church is doing it if you think about it. So food for thought there.
I talked about it too on a video I made a couple months ago or a couple weeks ago. And it's funny that famous picture, they showed how it was made, like the guy who originally made it, and it's just like a toy submarine that he put like plaster on or whatever to make the head so that he could just like pull it through the water with a string. So it was very, very simple, very rudimentary.
Yeah. And it's funny that like the truth will exist for stuff out there, but it doesn't even matter. Like people will still believe it anyway. Now, granted, I imagine that the total population of believers in the Loch Ness monster is a lot smaller compared to other cryptids.
Yeah.
Like I think Bigfoot is king, right? I think everybody like Bigfoot's the big seller. Loch Ness monster is like the History Channel special that you kind of watch every once in a while, but like Bigfoot is king, I think, in that domain,
for sure.
right?
I used to believe in all the cryptids at some point or another.
I think if you're like under the age of 12, you just naturally have a belief. Yeah, like I remember believing in all the cryptids too. I just wanted it to be out there. I remember going to a camp here in Texas. Oh yeah, for sure. I was gonna say I remember growing up at a camp here in Texas where they talked about the goat man, which was like this man goat hybrid, obviously, and they showed us pictures of this thing. And now, like looking at it on Google Images, it's literally just a guy with a rubber goat mask. But as a kid, I just thought it was the scariest thing ever. And I remember not getting a lot of sleep that night, thinking, "Oh man, what if the goat man just comes out and like tries to eat me?" That was like my biggest worries at the time. Now it's like paying taxes and rent, so arguably equally scary, if not more so.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, Red, thank you so much for calling in with that story. That was really entertaining. I really like that. So I hope you have a great rest of your night, and don't let the Loch Ness monster come around, see you catching catch you talking smack, right? Because I hear he gets angry about that kind of stuff. But anyway, folks, before we move on here, I want to talk about some special events that are coming up. These are different announcements from the usual stuff. So if you're the kind of person that skips the announcements, you really want to hear this one, okay? First, I want to let you know, though, that you can email the show. It's at truth@atheist-community.org, or you can reach out to the ACA through tv@atheist-community.org, and you can see what's going on our website as well. It's atheist-community.org, naturally. But there's also a Facebook group that you should check out that's run by fans for fans. And if you haven't seen it already, it's really cool. There's people that talk about the show there and also all the related stuff. So check that out if you haven't already. Okay, so now let me get to some fun stuff. Okay, so in case you haven't heard, it's been 2 years since we have done a show in person, in our studio in person, right, for Truth Wanted. We have done 1 or 2 specials since then, but we haven't been able to get back into the studio. So we are doing more live shows, and we're kind of easing ourselves back into it. And that's not just for Truth Wanted, but also all the other Atheist Community of Austin shows. So our first event that we're going to be doing together is going to be Saturday, August 27th. It's the return of our Bat Cruise. What is the Bat Cruise? Well, it basically get on a boat and we go out to Lady Bird Lake and see all the bats that fly out underneath Congress Bridge. It's pretty cool. So you guys should definitely come out to that. I'm going to be there. Matt Dillahunty's going to be there. Student Dr. Ben's going to be there. Johnny P. Angel's going to be there. Jim Barrows is going to be there. A lot of people are going to be there. And tickets are limited for this thing. So go check out the website, which is going to be linked there in the description. But it's just atheist-community.org/bat-cruise. And you can check it out. Tickets are going to be $40, and it's a 2-hour cruise from 7 to 9 p.m. That's going to begin at 6:30. It is a bring your own beverage event, and we would love to see you there. And then after that, in the studio on August 28th, if you're in Austin, you can join and be a part of the studio audience for a live showing of the Atheist Experience at 4:30 p.m. with Matt Dillahunty and Jim Barrows. And even before that, you can also see Talk Heathen at 1 p.m. That's going to be hosted by Johnny P. Angel and student Dr. Ben. So if you want to be part of either of those live audiences, check it out. Obviously, all of our shows are live, but you get to see it right there. And you probably won't have as much technical issues and stuff that we seem to be having lately on some of our shows. So check that out if you're going to be in the Austin area. We would love to see you there. So we're kind of getting to the tail end of the show here. And I just kind of want to talk with you, Trevor. I think you're like a really interesting guy. you have a lot to say. You write your thoughts out in your videos and podcasts and stuff. What's been on your mind recently as far as stuff that you really want to talk about? Because I feel like it's people like us, we kind of talk about the same things over and over again, but there's still like a couple of topics that really hit us, right? What's been hitting you lately?
That's a good question. I mean, it's funny because like I'll think of an idea for a video and then just start working on it right away. And so I don't have room in my brain sometimes for for other things. But something that always gets me in this time of year is just like the Christian outrage over like modesty culture and purity culture, and just how angry people get because somebody's wearing like a crop top or something like that. Like, I don't know if you heard of, there was a woman who got a ticket at a fair because she was wearing jean shorts, and they gave her like an actual fine for it. And just like how that kind of stuff permeates, that's not the right word. Anyway, their culture, and just how like, I don't know, just how angry that makes me about how we can just be the judge of other people's bodies and what they do with it. And so I want to wear my short shorts. Is that so wrong?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I was talking to my mom the other day, and I was just kind of complaining about money and the economy and stuff.
Yeah.
And she was kind of complaining about her job too. And I was just like, well, Mom, you should feel lucky because I have a lot of friends that like supplement their income by posting pictures of themselves online. I know you wouldn't want to do that, right? And she was just like, what? People that are like that? She literally said, you're friends with those people? And I was just like, yes, Mom, I am friends with people who like post on OnlyFans and stuff, because guess what? They're also people.
Exactly.
And like it's just another way for them to make money. And she was so aghast by that. And it was just and I want to be cheeky in that moment and be like, well, even Jesus was okay with hanging out with prostitutes in his time, right? Or sex workers in his time. So like, we should be doing the same thing. But obviously I don't view it quite in that way, right? Like obviously when that parable was kind of invented, which is interesting because that's one of the ones that we know was kind of invented after the fact. But like there's obviously a class distinction there between sex workers of that time being seen as lowly, right? Which has still translated today, 2,000 years later, for our culture. So, that's a fun thing to deconstruct.
Yeah, it really is. And if it's, it's because I know, I have a few friends who are sex workers and stuff too. And it's that same thing where there's such a stigma around it. And it's like, it's crazy that the things that hold over, even for people who don't necessarily believe, like have those same worldviews anymore, there's like something there that just makes them look down on people who have traditionally been looked down on. And it's silly. It's wrong.
Yeah, it's just a custom, right? Like there's no real logical reason behind it. It's just this is how these people have been viewed. And even saying like these people feels really weird because it's just like it's just people I know, like it's just regular people making these decisions and stuff. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. But on that topic, what do you think was the hardest or one of the more harder topics for you to deconstruct and kind of let go?
Probably abortion was one of the things that because it's so drilled into you that it's murder, right? And it's so like you're just like told over and over again that this is murder and stuff. And then when I lost my faith, I'm like, I gotta hold on to some things. And then that it didn't take me long, don't get me wrong, but it was like that was a tough one to wrap my head around, that like, oh no, this is just something that was used as an evangelical tool to get them to the voting booth. And like there's that was one that was a little harder for me to deconstruct. And even on like the understanding thing is like, even after I lost my faith, I didn't understand the whole trans thing. It was like, that's a dumb stance to have when you can understand it by reading things and by meeting people who have different experiences.
Right.
So
right.
It was one of those things. It was
even the framing is funny.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's understanding the whole trans thing.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean like knowing that the trans community exists? Like,
Exactly.
yeah, that
Trans people are people.
I'll give you that one too. Right, like I didn't know any trans people growing
Yeah.
up, so it was so much of it really was a foreign concept for me. And then like when you actually have trans
Yeah.
friends, and it's like, oh, they're
Yeah.
fine. There's nothing to worry
Yeah,
about here.
exactly.
The abortion thing was interesting for me though, because I felt like I was an outlier amongst my Christian friends. I was actually okay with
really? Yeah.
abortion. I thought it actually made sense to me, and I think that's because I knew that abortions happen
Yeah.
naturally. So I didn't really see the difference between inducing that, especially like early in a pregnancy, versus what happens naturally. And I don't know where I picked up that fact. I don't know if my sex education was any better than any other kid who grew up in a public school in Texas, but like, I don't know, like that never bothered
Yeah.
me as much. I don't think my churches, I remember them talking about it a little bit, but not as much as other
Mhm.
people, I think, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because that was just one of those things that it was. I didn't go to the most hardcore fundamentalist church growing up, but that was still one of the things they would teach. They would have a Sunday night where they'd bring in some pro-life anti-abortion activists, and they'd give a talk or whatever, and it was just part of the culture.
Yeah, which is weird because like that also is a very specific. I mean, I know you've talked about this in your essays.
Yeah.
It's probably very well known for those who don't know. Like that has a very specific political origin that was not always present within Christian communities. Like Christian communities did not have strong opinions about it one way or another for a long time. One, because I guess artificial abortifices, right?
Sure.
Abortifices, that's it. Drugs that induce aborticipants, right? That's the word I'm looking for. They weren't as good as they were like in the 20th century, right? So that probably has something to do with it. But also, I mean, it just kind of became a wedge issue in like the 60s for voters and stuff, and that has very weird weird historical context to that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's it's something that doesn't mean anything to so many people, and then all of a sudden you just find a way to make it mean something, and then 50 years later there's some guy in Toronto who's like, I gotta hold on to this. It's just ridiculous.
Right, yeah. And then you make a whole YouTube channel,
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
a podcast. Well, podcast before that, then a YouTube channel. Like that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of reaching the tail end of the show here, so I think I'm gonna try to ramp things up. I want to thank everybody who has been watching the show today. You guys are awesome, and of course, thank you to everybody that is donating on that Patreon and making this show happen. And of course, I need to give a very special thanks to Trevor Poelman for coming back onto the show, but this time I get to talk to Trevor. So that's what makes it really cool. Trevor, where can people find you at?
Yeah, you can find me at Believe It or Not on YouTube or on Facebook or Twitter, or Believe It or Not podcast on the old Instagram. So that's where you can find me, or just sometimes
There it
I'll
is.
be walking
Short and
around the
sweet.
street and you can say hi to me.
Hey, yeah, Trevor is actively giving you permission to say hi to him on the street. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
I don't think I would do the same. Well, actually, I think this show's small enough where you'll probably just be like one person one time, and I might be cool with that. But Trevor, you have a lot of people that watch your stuff. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if
who
I'd be
knows?
as okay with that, but hey.
Or you can find me at Fan
Who
Expo in
knows?
Toronto next week. I'll be there.
Oh, cool. And of course, I am going to be at the Back Cruise next weekend, so you guys should definitely look at that and come to Austin if you want to hang out with me. So there is one open invitation to come check me out. And of course, this show happens live Fridays at 7 p.m. Central every week. You should definitely check it out live if you're listening to an audio recording of this. But once again, I want to give a special thanks to Trevor for being on and for doing the stuff that you do. Last but not least, I have to thank the wonderful, amazing, spectacular crew that helps make this show happen every single week. Go into that crew cam. Look at those folks. See, we only got 3 this time because there's only so many people that are willing to work with me. Like they keep dropping like flies is what it is. But really, no, the crew is really awesome and wonderful. and they help make this show work the way it does. So thank you, crew, for doing that. And before we close out the show, what's your words of wisdom tonight, Trevor? Do you have any words of wisdom?
Be kind. That's all I got. Just be kind, be nice to people, be patient, I guess is a good one. A lot of people aren't that right now. So all those things.
Be kind, be nice to people, and be patient. I work with that. Thank you for the words of wisdom.
Thank you.
Very good, very good. And with the words of wisdom out there, that is going to be it for tonight. I am your host, Objectively Dan, and remember to always keep wanting the truth. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Watch The Non-Prophets and join the hosts in the live chat, Sundays at 3 p.m. Central, between the Atheist Experience and Talk Hidden. Visit tiny.cc/ytnp.